The Chicago Bears have signed a brand new backup quarterback, and we go through what that means for Nick Foles next on the Unbearable Sports Podcast.
Yeah, she's got some nice long hair.
Welcome back to the Unbearable Sports Podcast. I'm your host, Brad Barron, and welcome in to another great episode of the Unbearable Sports Podcast. We are going to be breaking down the new quarterback, Trevor Siemian, what to expect out of him, if there's anything to expect out of him, with him being a backup quarterback. But then the biggest thing is this going to be it for Nick Foles? What are the options that we have getting rid of Foles? And also, who might actually want to pick up Foles, and what should we be looking forward into the future? So thank you guys so much. Make sure to hit the like button. Make sure to subscribe so that you can get all of our Chicago Bears sports coverage. So let's get right into it then. So obviously the Bears just signed backup quarterback Trevor Siemian. So we were looking for someone for the Bears to bring in, and kind of was hoping for a couple other people, but gotta say, I'm actually really happy with this signing, mainly because of this. I'm actually going to just show a little bit of the contract details. So this is from Spot Rack. They don't have all the details yet, what the yearly compensation is going to look like, what that yearly breakdown is. But my favorite part of this deal is that Trevor Siemian is a backup type of quarterback. Even though he's started a lot of games, we'll go through the stats. But I just want to first go through the salary, because this to me is the best part. When you look at the salary, you shouldn't be playing your backup quarterback unless something goes wrong. And right now, we're not looking to win the Super Bowl. I mean, we want to, but maybe this year is probably not going to be a Super Bowl caliber type of year. But he's a 2-year, $4 million deal. So you're looking at an average salary of $2 million. That is a really cheap deal for a backup quarterback. You see a lot of them going for a lot higher. Like, it might be around $5 million per year. So just off the bat, I really like this deal. I really like what we were able to get him for, and it's so much different than our other quarterbacks. So I want us to take a trip down memory lane real quick with just how what did Pace do? What did our other GM do with our backup quarterbacks? Because just to kind of put this into perspective, we had Mike Glennon, 3 years, $45 million, so 15 a year. Chase Daniel, 2 years, 10 million. Nick Foles, 3 years, 24 million, and Andy Dalton, 1 year, 10 million. Now, I will say though that Mike Glennon was brought in to be a starter, as crazy as that sounds. Foles was brought in to be a starter, and Dalton was brought in to be a starter. So there's that you can kind of give them the defense for. But honestly, looking at this is the big reason why I love Siemian right up front, is just he's cheap. He's a cheap backup quarterback, and you don't really need a backup quarterback, and like we said, unless somebody goes down. So that gives you the flexibility to potentially bring in someone young, and you're not tied to a backup quarterback. Do what the Patriots always did. Draft quarterbacks, or try to have some backup quarterbacks that you can potentially develop, just in case if anything goes wrong with Fields, but also just so that you have a backup that you can be developing, that's there and that's cheap. But really, I had to put this stuff up because to me, Glennon, Daniel, Foles, Dalton, and now we finally have a cheap backup. This is how you take advantage of that rookie deal. You don't overpay for a backup quarterback or another starter to be competing with your rookie quarterback. So enough money talk, because we've just been talking about the money. What can we expect out of this quarterback as a whole, Trevor Siemian? I just want to break down the stats, and then we'll get into some of the Nick Foles coverage. But really, when we're just looking at the stats of a Trevor Siemian, overall, from a throwing perspective, he threw 41 touchdowns in his career to 27 interceptions. What I thought was crazy was I didn't know that he started 29 games. I didn't know that it was that many. I knew that he did start a little bit because out in Denver, he started 14 games when he was 25. And then in 2017, when he was 26 years old, he did end up starting 10 games. Now, that's really when he did fall off because in his first year as a starter for Denver, he had 18 touchdowns, 10 interceptions, and then in 2017 had 12 touchdowns and 14 interceptions, only threw for 2,200 yards in 10 games. So really not the best. But this is what you expect out of a backup quarterback. And he had a really good season, not going to lie, starting 4 games, throwing for 1,154 yards with New Orleans and 11 touchdowns and 3 interceptions. So to me, what I'm seeing is like he's a good backup. Like it's not saying that he's going to take the world by storm, but you get a good backup player for a good deal. Like to me, this is better than Chase Daniel. This is better. And Chase Daniel was so much more expensive. So I like having somebody like that that can come in, that can play if God forbid anything happens to Justin Fields. So cheap, good person. That's what you want to see. So I was really happy with the signing overall. The only other downside, though, I do just want to bring this up. If you've listened to us before, I am a fan of bringing in a backup quarterback that's similar to the starting quarterback. Now, this is not the case because Trevor Siemian is not a very mobile guy. He throughout his career, he's only averaged about 2 rushes a game, so not the fastest of people, but still, you are at least bringing someone in. Yet again, maybe you bring in an undrafted guy, maybe you draft someone late if you accumulate a whole bunch of picks. But really, maybe you bring in someone like that that's a little bit faster. But still, you're at least bringing in a good person that's cheap. But speaking of money, let's go to the person who just is not cheap. Because Trevor Siemian, okay, good. Hopefully, we never see him. But let's go over to Nick Foles because now that we have a backup quarterback, what does this mean for Nick Foles? Honestly, I don't think they would keep both of them. I don't know why you would keep somebody that really hasn't been a good scheme fit with all the different schemes that we've ran. And it's just, why do you have him around? Because it seems like Dalton and Fields were closer rather than Folds and Fields. So that's why I just think that you just get rid of him. But let's just talk about what if you just cut him? So Nick Foles right now, if you cut him pre-June 1st, you save $3 million. So yet again, another reason to love the Trevor Siemian deal. It's cheaper than $3 million a year, so you're saving money by just flat out cutting Nick Foles. But now Nick Foles also got a bunch of extra money from a signing bonus. I think about a week ago, there's a little deadline, and that's already passed. So before, if we were to trade him, we would have saved about 6.6 million, but right now we would save only 4 million if we ended up trading him. So if you trade him, we save an extra million rather than just cutting him and saving 3 million. So to me, if we can trade him too and get some sort of compensation, the better. That's what we're looking forward to. But that's why I want to go through just the top 5 locations where he could potentially go. Because what we got to be looking out for is that just him as an overall player, we know that he's a solid backup. I'm not saying that he's a starter. I'm not Matt Nagy out here. I'm not thinking that he's going to be the starting quarterback for someone. But we saw this when our quarterbacks went down. Nick Foles is not a terrible player. If he is your backup quarterback, he at least gives you a chance to win compared to other backup quarterbacks that are out there. So that's a big piece. We're looking at who could use an upgrade for a backup quarterback. Maybe there's a scheme fit, but then also who can kind of take on that salary because yet again, it's not going to be a cheap deal when he gets traded. So you're still going to be seeing a larger salary. So who can at least take that on and have the luxury of a backup quarterback making a decent amount of money? Otherwise, they would probably just wait for him to get cut and talk themselves out of any sort of trade for Nick Foles. So here's some of the top spots. My favorite spot, this is my number one, is the Dallas Cowboys. Because the Dallas Cowboys, we know Dak has an injury history. It was a freak injury, yes, But when you're looking at the backups, you have Cooper Rush, you have Ben DiNucci, you have Will Greer. And also, they have $14 million in cap space. So they do have some wiggle room from a cap perspective if they wanted to make this deal. So that's why they're one of my top spots because Rush, DiNucci, Greer. I feel like we've seen DiNucci so much because of the injuries. So to me, that's why I like the idea. Like, Foles is an upgrade to any of those backups, and you can bring him in, and he instantly, you feel a lot more comfortable as the Cowboys, especially because you know that the Cowboys are going to be trying to make it to the Super Bowl. By having a backup, if you lose Dak, having Foles as your backup gives you the opportunity to potentially be competitive in these games rather than trotting out DiNucci, rather than the DiNucci. So next team is yet again another Super Bowl contender that has some cap space, and that's the Indianapolis Colts. Obviously, we have the connections with them with Flus, but with the Colts as an overall why is their backups. Sam Ellinger. I'm actually a Texas Longhorn fan. I like Ellinger, but is he really a backup that you want to have out there? Especially because, yet again, you want to have somebody who can kind of elevate your wins in case if someone goes down. And Matt Ryan is the new quarterback in town. And honestly, Foles and Ryan, very statuesque types of passers, getting someone that you can bring in that is very similar to your starter. Frank Reich, there's connections there between him and Foles. There was already a lot of talk last year that he was going to be the backup quarterback, but you have a Carson Wentz who, remember, Carson Wentz did not win the Super Bowl. Nick Foles did. So now, is there an opportunity to trade him as the actual backup now that Carson Wentz is gone? They have $22 million in cap, and they could definitely benefit from having an upgraded backup quarterback. You're kind of just upgrading. This is your nuclear bomb shelter type of plan. You trade for someone just in case if something goes nuclear and you lose your starting quarterback, you're able to then have somebody that can win you games. And I think that's just a logical person to bring in, especially since him and Ryan are so close and he knows Frank Reich and he knows and understands that system. But then the next one, this is one that I don't feel the huge, I don't feel like this would happen, but there is a chance because of the connection with Doug Peterson, and that is the Jacksonville Jaguars. Why I feel like this might not happen is the Jags have already traded him away. They gave him the bad contract. They got rid of him. They celebrated that they didn't have Nick Foles anymore. And now the new regime is going to trade for him. I would love for them to do that. But if I'm management, I'm really second guessing doing something like that because they already celebrated that he was gone. They already feel the fan base might already feel like he's bad, but then here you have Doug Peterson saying, "No, no, 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 trust me. He's good with me, but yeah, just ignore all the other stuff that you saw before. He's good with me." So that to me right there gets me a little bit nervous. I don't really see that why they would want to bring him in. Also, they don't have a lot of cap space because they basically spent all their money in free agency for a whole bunch of people. For pretty much any top free agent that was out there, they threw money at. So they don't have a lot left over, but they do need a backup quarterback. CJ Beathard, Jake Luton, not the best of backups. Young, yes, but that's where Nick Foles could come in, understands Doug Peterson's system, and could really kind of help out with that. Now, next, the last couple, these were a little bit more difficult to kind of figure out. And to me, one to just look at is the Carolina Panthers. Carolina Panthers really with Sam Darnold. They're not happy with Sam Darnold. Matt Rule really needs to try and win some games. This is why, yes, they have $31 million in cap space, but this could be a possibility if they want a veteran backup that's out there. Now, the big question in my mind is how are they going to handle the quarterback position? Because are they going to just try and draft a quarterback? That's why the draft is a huge, huge date with all of this trading of quarterbacks. Because at least with like the Colts, they have their guy now. The Cowboys have their guy. The Jags have their guy. Now, as we get later on, there's really more question marks with the draft. So that's why the Carolina Panthers could bring somebody in, and then now they go, well, we have Darnold that we're already basically paying for, and we have this rookie quarterback. We don't need Nick Foles. I don't want to have three quarterbacks in this quarterback room. But if they absolutely hate Sam Darnold, maybe they want Nick Foles to be that backup. And yet again, they do have the space, but it's the question mark about the draft. The next team, too, was the Seahawks. And when I was looking through it, the Seahawks was a team that I was going, nah, there's no way. There's no way. Because I think of Geno Smith as the backup quarterbacks. I think of these fast quarterbacks, but that was because of Russell Wilson. Now, here's the Drew Lock era of the Seattle Seahawks. Now, yet again, very similar. Lots of cap space, but it's all about the draft. What are they going to do in the draft? It would be smart for them to draft a quarterback. And also, is Drew Lock, is Jacob Eason, how comfortable do they feel with those guys? They claim that Drew Lock is great, but yet again, that is every single organization ever when they bring in somebody. This is our guy. We're so glad that we were able to bring in Drew Lock. We think he's so talented, but that could be all a smokescreen to just draft somebody that they instantly think is better. The only other two teams that were kind of in contention were the Atlanta Falcons, but they have negative cap space. That's where I just don't see them wanting to make a trade. And then the Bengals were another person just as an upgrade over Brandon Allen. And actually, now that I said that, I'd actually put the Bengals over the Seattle Seahawks for my top 5 because Joe Burrow, yes, they've improved that O-line, but what if he goes down? We know that he's taken a beating over his career. Maybe he continues to do that, even though they've been trying to prioritize that offensive line. But just having a good backup in case if your franchise does go down and you have the room to make it happen. But what do you think? Honestly, the more that I was going through this exercise, the more that I was looking at teams, the more that I was going, yeah, I don't see them making a move this week unless it's a cut just because of the draft. I really stand by that because the draft is going to show what the teams have at quarterback. So that's where honestly the Colts, the Cowboys, the Bengals, and the Jags could all be in consideration this week. But really all the other teams, the Panthers, the Seahawks, the Falcons, that's all more of like post-draft potentially. So I could see polls maybe just holding on to Foles and saying, hey, we're going to wait till after draft, and if we really can't get anything, goodbye, we're going to cut you, and we're going to save the $3 million. So we'll see what they end up doing. Let me know in the comments what you think that the Bears are going to do with Nick Foles, or is he just going to be chilling around? Is he good as gone? But no matter what, we should be saving some cap space with Foles being out of the picture completely. Thank you guys so much. Make sure to subscribe, like, and follow us. Make sure to listen and download the podcast on any spot that you can listen to podcasts. So Spotify, Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, and Unbearable Sports Podcast. We're out.
Yeah, she's got some nice long hair, and you know that she's a bad chick.
Thank you for listening to this Belly Up Sports Podcast Network product. Some said we go belly up, so we made it our name, and we're still here.